order. All right, I'll just start over.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, you're,
No, I mean, so it's August 16th, 2021 at 7:03 p.m. I call this public hearing held by the Wellfleet Select Board to order in accordance with the temporary suspension and enhancement of the open meeting law requirements by the General Court of the Commonwealth. This hearing is held in compliance with MGL Part 1, Title 7, Chapter 40A, Section 11, and the Town of Wellfleet shellfishing policy and regulations, discussing the planning of how the Town of Wellfleet will utilize the HDYLTA parcel will be discussed. Please keep in mind that comments will be limited to the issues relating to the planning and management of the HDYLTA parcels. Only one person may speak at a time. All parties are expected to conduct themselves civilly. Each member of the public must identify themselves for the public record. Each speaker will receive no more than 2 minutes per turn speaking. And I will allow the members of the select board to speak once first before going to the public. All right. And Rebecca has the public hearing notice as it was advertised in the paper up on the screen. And then can I start sharing my screen?
You
Rebecca?
can. Yep,
Yep.
go right ahead. Let me stop this share and then you can have it.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes, Mike.
I just like to officially recuse myself from this discussion as a member of the select board and reserve to the right to speak on my own behalf as a resident. And I'll rename myself here and recuse. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So is it sharing now, Rebecca?
yes,
Okay.
It is, you're good.
So this is the parcel, or the parcels. It comprises more than one. I developed this in discussions with Nancy about where the wild shellfishing areas were on the parcel. And so the color codes is the red color is wild productive bottom and is actively fished or culched. The green is the currently licensed areas. The blue, like down in here, these are the areas that were just have extensions pending. And this darker blue is the deeper waters coming out of Blackfish Creek. And the purple areas are areas where the bottom is likely unproductive in the parcel. So are there any questions regarding this map first?
Yeah. I have a question.
Shoot.
According to the materials provided here, what I'm looking at, let's see, the rest of the acreage has been documented by the Wellfleet Shellfish Department as wild productive bottom for shellfish resources, blah, 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 which means that it cannot be leased out for grants for shellfish farming. What portion of that would be on the map?
That's the red color.
Oh, okay, okay. So all the green areas are okay then.
The green areas are currently licensed.
Okay.
The purple areas are areas that are likely unproductive bottom. So if you're unfamiliar with the shellfish regulations, unproductive bottom is licensable.
Right, now I understand that.
Okay. Weird. I don't have the hands up.
It's
I don't
Helen.
either.
Yeah.
I'll just wave my hand, Ryan. I've
Okay,
got-
Helen?
Yeah, a question.
I can tell you if you want, Ryan.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, I will also anyway wave my hand. I don't know how to make my hand yellow. So Ryan, just to confirm something, the purple areas, which may or may not be productive, have been thought to maybe be as such from observation by the Shellfish Department or by people, you know, who are around out there, but they haven't been confirmed as unproductive by the DMF. Is that correct?
That's correct. I said
Yeah.
they're likely unproductive bottom.
Yes, I'm just confirming who ascertained that status. And so really, one might have the purple areas also be the crimson color, but we don't know yet. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. I really don't even have the participants on my screen anymore. So does anybody else have their hand up?
Nope, I don't have anyone right now with their hand up.
Okay. So back in I don't even have my dates straight.
I do.
Anyways, the Shellfish Constable and the Harbor Master asked us or sent a memo to us in regard when Mike DeVasto applied for a grant extension that we needed to look at this parcel and try to develop some sort of a plan for it. And then the SABs met on it a couple of times. The last time there was a 3-3 vote that recommended that. So basically, they did not make a recommendation one way or the other regarding the parcel. And then, so I don't know. Sorry, this is really confusing me without having the participants. Okay, so I guess I'll call on Nancy first. Nancy, if you will, can you speak to this?
Hang on, Nancy, I'll unmute you. You should be able to unmute now. There you go.
Can you see and hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So Will and I went out there after Mike's grant extension, and there were other grant extensions in the works, and there still are others in the works, not only in this area of town, but in other areas of the harbor. And we just thought that we should talk about best uses out here. I think right now, there's really been no conflicts, and these farmers represent probably a third of the shell fishing farms in the town, and they provide year-round economic opportunity for the town and year-round livelihoods for people. So it's a very important area of town. And I just think we should, and Will and I agreed, that we should just thoughtfully make sure that what we do out there is good for all. And based on what I see, it seems like there's room for some extensions, and it seems like we should, as a town, if we can, allow a small amount to be put, let's say, out to a lottery, to allow a new entrant to come in to the aquaculture industry, as long as they meet, you know, all of the protocols that they have to, all the credentials per the regulations. But there should be, you know, a small amount of opportunity out in this area without encroaching on the other traditional uses of beachgoers, walkers, kayakers, boaters. It's a pretty compact area. And I have some ideas about it that we can get into later if it seems appropriate. But the entire Wellfleet Harbor has been under aquaculture for decades and decades and decades. And we really don't have huge problems in my eyes. I haven't really come across huge user conflicts in my tenure here of 4 years. So I don't think that this should be difficult to, as a community, discuss and come to some mutual agreed upon terms to offer opportunities to both current grant holders and newcomers to the industry. I'm
Okay.
happy to answer any questions.
Helen?
Yes, may we screen share what is basically our walking orders, which is the policy that,
No.
excuse me, Ryan, I would like to screen share it. It has to do with what I'm about to say, and Rebecca has it.
No.
Yes, because
No.
the language in there,
Christ, Helen.
hey, Ryan.
Helen, there's trouble with screen sharing in the video and the whole Zoom.
Rebecca, can you screen share it?
I can screen share it. It's not really necessary.
I believe that it is, because what I'm going to say here, and Nancy didn't mention it, I agree with everything that Nancy just said. However, in our policy, which is our marching orders, and I'm thinking about everything I hear today in relation to it, it uses the words equitable uses. So if we could all read it now, it would be useful. It's section 2 in our shellfish regs. And for some reason it wasn't in the packet. But I am equally concerned with the use of this area by people who only have commercial permits. And since I've heard from more than one person over the years, and most recently in the June 4th meeting that the Shellfish Advisory Board had, thank you very much. Is that readable, or could it be bigger? In any case, that there are areas that are productive, and then there won't be, and then they'll be productive again, and this is over many years. And if you look at how many grants are already there, and the fact that not all of those grants is used to the max, one of the things that I hope we all look at is how much we want to keep this area open to people who fish in the wild and don't want to have grants or can't. And also, what parts of it could have more people on the grants that are already there? Thank you. I want you to particularly look.
So
It's very short, and I appreciate.
at this point, you need to stop discussing section 2 because it is not in the advertised notice for this hearing.
Except that it applies to what we're talking about, Brian, because it's the use of this area. And in our policy, it reminds us to think of the wild fishing people, the pickers in the wild, the people that just have commercial permits. That's the reason I wanted us to look at it. It's one of the ways in which this area is used. Thank you.
Okay, now where did that go? Janet?
I would at some point like to hear from the Shellfish Advisory Board members. Your choice. I mean, that's who advises us. So maybe they should start off saying something since after Nancy. Thank you.
Okay, well, they didn't have a set vote. So Nancy?
No, but they have looked at this. I mean, they're the Shellfish Advisory Board. The advisory boards are supposed to advise the select person. So not their vote, but each individual person, what they thought of it, what they didn't like about it, what they want to have happen, that sort of thing.
Okay, Nancy has her hand up, Rebecca.
She should be able to unmute, but hang on if she can't.
Yeah, no,
Hang on, Nance. Go ahead.
there you go.
All right, so this Becca Taylor, who's the chair of the Shellfish Advisory, is here. Can you see me?
Yep.
All right. So the Shellfish Advisory Board met on this topic several times. The most recent time we had a vote, it came 3-3, and we decided not to recommend anything in specific. There seemed to be a lot of indication that the status quo was pretty good, and because anybody who's looking to get an extension or a new grant would have to go through the Shellfish Department, the Harbor Master, and the state, that there are plenty of fail-safes involved already. And that protects the wild fishery, because you'd still have to prove to the state that it was wild. You'd still have to prove to the Shellfish Department that it was wild or not wild. And it allows for those fail-safes. The Natural Resources Advisory Board is usually consulted as well, I believe. So it looks like most of the concerned parties are involved already. So thank you.
Okay. So in some of those meetings, the overall acreage was said to be pretty small, fairly minimal. And one of the things that I wanted to show was the overall acreage, and to see if that and it, to me, it's not minimal. I'm not sure about others, but it's, over 20, 23, 24 acres that's potentially unproductive bottom. Much of it is contiguous. And some of the grants that were, including some of the grants that are out there now, they were actually awarded by the town by a lottery when the town developed a certain area out here to a number of different local shellfishermen. When those grants came into existence, they were by lottery, or they were assigned by lottery. So, Mike.
I'm here as an individual, not representing the select board or any other person, group or entity. I just have to make that clear before I speak. Basically, just to that point, I'm of the understanding that everything beyond mean low water is state property. So the largest grid area where the contiguous acreage is actually not on town property. And the areas that are on town property, I just have some knowledge of those areas, and a few of them are so high up on the beach area that they're, basically exposed probably 10 hours a day on those areas, similar to the inside part of one of my grants. So I think what you're talking about when you look at what's actually in the town property parcel of the HDYLTA area, it's substantially smaller amount. Not that those other areas aren't usable space, but it's really deep water over there. And I think, in my opinion, and it's my understanding that the acres that are farthest out that were developed, because I believe it was 1,650 feet. And at the time, that's what people believed. And that's the farthest acres out that exist that are licensed right now. They're 3-acre parcels, I believe. People have had a hard time producing on those acres. Nancy might have some more insight on that, because they're so difficult to access, and there's no floating gear allowed. So in in my opinion, looking at the map, it might make sense for the people who are out on those parcels to potentially be able to move in and clear that area for boating access, where the 5 3-acre parcels that currently exist are essentially really difficult to use. I mean, Nancy might have more insight, and I don't know if anybody is here, but those have changed hands several times. I don't know of anyone really having a successful, attempt in those areas. So that's a total, I think those are 3-acre parcels. That's like 15 acres or something like that. But even the area inside of that is a very difficult area to work, I would say. It's only exposed on extreme negative tides. So just to give my insight and my experience of that area for what it's worth.
So for the record, the dashed line on this map is the bounds of the parcel. So that's like here, it runs from there, even over here. I didn't even go all the way out, but it goes out to the middle of the channel and Blackfish Creek. So that is the bound of the parcel, and not, yeah, I mean, those are the boundaries, the bounds of it, so.
Mr. Chair, sorry, is it okay if
Yes.
I speak again?
Yep.
If you look at the survey from the town survey of the HDYLTA Trust, the mean low water mark, and that's available online, shows the actual bounds of the town property. And the original bounded area by the HDYLTA Trust was done at 1,650 feet, excluding mean low water. So you'd have to look up the survey from the town, which is done by NGVD, I think it is, the NOAA standards for mean low water, that standard was set by the land court over a case that involved mean low water. They determined that there needed to be a standard measure for mean low water, and that's what they decided to use. So that's how that was bounded. So if you look at the actual survey, you can see the line.
Okay. Nancy? So let's see.
She should be good to unmute.
Okay, can you just say unmuted, Nancy?
The problem is, I'm sorry, but there's talking going on here. And
Okay,
because people are talking about the map, it was hard for people to see it on the computer screens, and I have a big one printed out. So please ask me the question that you'd like me to answer, because I was involved in a discussion.
okay, so actually, so the actual survey that was done as part of the appraisal by the town when the property was appraised does include that boundary line. So that's the boundary line of the parcel, is that dash line. And that was the survey that was done by Coastal Engineering on behalf of the town.
Correct. The only difference
Yep.
was where the mean low water mark was. It was different on the two different, but it doesn't change the usage of those areas.
Yeah, and then the map that I'm showing here, the dashed line on the parcel on the map is the bounds that were established by Coastal Engineering. So there is this area here between the deep water grant, a couple of the deep water grants and the inshore boundary line of the HDYLTA parcel. But for other areas, you know, the bound goes out into the deep water grants. So I just want to make it clear that this is not just a limited area. And that is posted online right now as part of the packet for this meeting. Okay, so Nancy, do you have anybody there with questions?
When's the pandemic gonna be over?
Did you hear that one?
Yeah, probably never. So, all right, so the question is, does the town want to undertake some sort of planning process for the parcel? Do we want to just allow people to apply for extensions, and that, I mean, that's the path of least resistance towards developing the property? Whether or not there needs to be some sort of plan to maybe move the deep water grants in, so that they have a more workable site. And how can and what sort of,
I think they should move those in.
yeah, and then what sort of, I mean, we also have the upland property owners as well. You know, how much more development can this area reasonably be expected to take? You know, and we do also have to keep the boating populace in mind as well. Because, you know, I mean, back in the day, I actually used to sail out of Blackfish Creek, and I don't even think I could do that anymore in a sailboat without a motor. You know, it's unfortunate, but that's, I mean, the whole area is like that. There's also this area right here. This area, the grants or the license areas. So basically there's a difference between as they exist on the ground and as they exist in, I don't think it's by GPS, it's as it exists in the map. So this area is that correct, Nancy?
The 3 grants out there are going to be, get a field survey.
Yeah.
For where they are operating now.
Yeah, so you have this area out here. There's definitely probably at least one viable, probably 2 or 3 viable areas that would be viable to be licensed. You know, and the question is, do we want to just, you know, let people that already have grants be the only ones that can have grants? Because they have a much faster way of accessing the acreage than anybody else. So, okay.
Helen has her hand up and Ann Sterling has her hand up.
Okay. Helen, you had yours up first, so.
Thank you. And I'm glad we're doing this. All these ideas could be very good ideas. Something that needs to be put out there as a fact is that normally when a municipality buys a piece of land, even if it's much smaller than this, I mean, in Truro, they bought the Walsh property and they appointed a committee of 16 people and they talked about it for a year. I don't think we need to do that. Eastham bought the, what's it called, the Tea Time property. Again, they appointed a committee. A normal planning process is what this is the beginning of, or rather the 3 meetings that the SAB had on it were the beginning of it. But all the ideas that have been brought up for the use of this in relation to the other uses, I think is essential for us to honor the taxpayers' commitment to it and also honor that policy that we saw briefly earlier that has a very, very good basis for making decisions about the use of the harbor for the purpose of shellfishing. And first and foremost, it's to encourage good commercial use for shellfishing. And I believe in that clearly. I've been dedicated to it for years. But it also respects the fact that not everybody wants to harvest shellfish in the same way. And we have to think about the wild fishers. We have to think about what's actually going on in these purple areas. And I'm very glad that we're having this hearing now. I would recommend, once I stop coughing, excuse me, that we do what came up in one of the shellfish committee meetings as a good idea, which is to appoint a group of people to meet on this before any more grants get extended or given to anybody, and to ask them to work on it. And please excuse me, I gotta get a drink of water. Anyway, I'm done.
Ann Sterling,
She should be all set to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
yep,
Yes.
Okay, good. So it would be worth, I mean, I actually like Helen's idea of setting up a committee, but I think that the committee ought to have representatives of the people who live above that beach and also who maintain the access roads. And because there is a concern about the stability of the beach, given the number of trucks that are on it, and to add a lot more, several more grants would mean presumably several more trucks. And the whole quality, the whole environmental impact of having, you know, at any one time, there might be, at a low tide, there might be between 20 and 30 trucks out there. So it's not just about whether the grant itself is viable, but how, what the environmental impact would be of farming it, given the way in which the grants are accessed, which is via trucks on a dirt road and then trucks on the beach. And the beach does take a real beating from the trucks, and it's made, I don't know, better or worse depending on how you look at it, by a kind of contradictory requirement from Conscom for a lot of the owners to nourish their stone revetments with sand each year, which adds, and that sand then washes out and it makes the beach softer, which then forces the oystermen to drive in different parts of the beach so they don't get stuck. So it's not, I think it's not just a question of surveying where the grants are and whether you could squeeze in a few more people, but also think about what it would mean from a bigger picture of adding in more people. And I think that would be something a committee could take a look at, but that bigger picture of use. And I know several of you mentioned, you know, swimmers and walkers and boaters, and that also would need to be considered as part of it, as well as the wild collectors.
okay. Mike,
Again, speaking as an individual, I just picking up on what Ann Sterling was saying, but also what Helen had brought up about the wild. I'd just like to point out that there's 3,815 acres of intertidal area and about 215 acres of licensed grant site, which is about 6% of the intertidal area that's aquaculture. But the thing I wanted to point out that Ann Sterling had brought up is about the use, and there is a recommendation from the Shellfish Management Plan that the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission understand the underlying issues and repercussions of policies regarding expansion of licensed areas versus granting new licenses. And that is, you know, the additional new licenses do add both more vehicles on the beach and those things. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just bringing it up because it was a recommendation from the Shellfish Management Plan. And also, as far as being an equitable resource, I believe as far as owners per acre, we have one of the most, if not the most equitably distributed resources in Massachusetts as far as aquaculture use. And that basically, I'd just like to, you know, point out, in my opinion, how well planned and functional our aquaculture and shellfish system is, and how it does operate with very minimal conflict, considering the type of economic environmental inputs that the industry creates. So in my opinion, the planning and the regulations and the policy that this town has crafted since 1965 with the establishment of the Shellfish Advisory Board has really created a great industry that a lot of towns would be really love to have. And so I think those are things for the board to consider as far as moving forward. But I do think that the Shellfish Advisory Board and the Natural Resources Advisory Board, who have been working in creating the planning, and the HDYLTA property has been in continuous use and management and under the plan, which is the shellfish policy and regulations for decades. So it's not like the town purchased a property that wasn't already in use and under a plan. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, in response to that, I would say that there are multiple licensed areas with more than one license holder for an area. Just saying that increasing the number, allowing more extensions necessarily would mean fewer vehicles on the beach is kind of misleading. Especially because the extensions kind of exist separately from the initial licensed area. So over time, that could mean that they're held entirely by separate people. And it is, you know, it's just, you know, a certain amount of acreage is going to produce a certain amount of vehicle traffic in the long term, especially when we have, you know, a bunch of different licensed areas that are, a lot of them are broken up into, you know, smaller pieces, and we have multiple ones where there's, you know, might be 3 or 4 trucks out there for one licensed area. So I would say that's kind of, yeah. So I would say, I guess, what's the next steps here? Like, because do we want to move? So we'll just treat it one by one here. Do we think it would be a good idea to move the deeper water grants in? So members of the board.
So on the map, Ryan, could you explain that exactly where you're talking about and where you would move them into? And the purpose of it again?
These ones here that aren't color coded, these are the deeper water grants.
Right.
Okay. They are basically never entirely out of the water. On a usual tide, they might be at dead low, they might be up to the chest in water. So they're really hard to work. There's currently only 2 that are that are being really used as primary production site. The other ones are kind of being used for a seed collection. And then if they were moved in like into here, a little bit over here, maybe, this is a little bit shallower. It becomes a little bit easier for people to work.
So those purple areas aren't being used, that you can just move them in?
They are not currently being used, and they are
Okay.
likely not productive wild bottom either. So they're licensable probably, but not 100%. Nancy? And can you unmute Helen? She keeps muting herself as well. Rebecca.
Hang on one sec.
Yep.
I got Helen. I just need to
Okay,
get Nancy.
Nancy.
That would be so much.
You're
better.
good.
Okay, so thank you. So again, it's not our decision if the bottom is productive or not. It takes a biological survey.
Yep.
But those 5 grants out there, I have had conversations over time, and there is a general consensus that it would be worthwhile to try and move them in and return that area to the wild. It would be, instead of having occasionally a dragger come through that corridor and then get everybody on edge, to me, it would be better to just move those in, and I would hope that we would be able to increase productivity in such a way that the grants would be able to meet minimum productivity. I'm not saying that that area in there is like 100% better than where they are now, but it makes access easier. And I think that there is a little bit of hope for reaching the minimum productivity that our regulations require.
Okay,
And I've
Helen?
spoken to the state about
Has
it.
her hand
And
up, and
they,
then Will Sullivan has his hand up. Sorry,
Yep,
Nancy.
I see him. Helen?
Okay, I agree with everything Nancy just said. I think it would be a good idea, liberating that area for boats, not having it be so hairy for people using the channel. And the most important part to get back to that policy is we're supposed to think about how the resource can be most used, keeping in mind the carrying capacity of the habitat. So this wouldn't be creating new grants. It would be simply putting them in a place where they would be more easily used. Thank you.
Okay, William Sullivan, the Wellfleet Harbor Master, I should say. So can you
You're good,
unmute
Will.
him?
Yep,
Yep.
he's good.
All right. Thank you all for having this hearing. I just wanted to weigh in since we're going topic by topic with it on the navigational issue there. I don't know the logistics of moving grants or whether and how to find that area and if it is suitable. But from a navigational standpoint, compacting those grants into and against the other grants in that area would significantly add ease to navigating that whole stretch of land. When you go through that area, and I was just out there on Saturday, we had a capsized sailboat right in one of those. It drifted across into the grant actually, and it's really hard to tell that you're in between grants or where exactly you are. So if that was a possibility to move those into that would be a huge impact to the open water. That would be an excellent impact to the open space of that. I also have a few other things, but I can wait topic by topic if you wish, Ryan.
Yep. John?
I just wanted to echo what Will said. I took a charter actually into Blackfish Creek day before yesterday. And I am able to do it when there's enough water in there, but I really have to watch myself. In connection with that, I just want to mention that I filed a disclosure day before yesterday because of the fact that I am impacted by the navigational issues as a commercial operator. So I don't know if I need to read that or not, but I just wanted to let you know that I did file it.
Okay. So in the interest, it sounds like in general, these grants would be, or these licensed areas would probably be best served to be moved in. In order to do that, I would move that between parcels 17.20 and 17.19 on the northern bound, and 17.85 FA, that for moratorium on additional licenses or licensed areas within that area. Do I have a second?
Second, Helen.
Okay, roll call vote.
So I would say aye, but okay, so I'm definitely the person on the board who has the least knowledge about shell fishing. I think we should just ask for any other comments from the public because this is all kind of a big deal. But if Nancy and Will like it and you guys like it, then I'll vote yes. But this is all about hearing everybody.
Yep, Nancy has her hand up. Nancy? Sorry, can unmute her?
Yep, I just have to scroll down the list. Hang on one second. You're good.
So yeah, I just want to be clear with this type of a motion and vote that it leaves the process open for me to work with the grant holders and the state and the select board at moving those grants in. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, that's the first part of this. So it's going to be a couple of separate motions. So, but
I'm
yes,
just asking about this current motion, that there'll be a moratorium on new grants, but just, semantics as we hopscotch them in, they will be treated like new grants because just like an extension, you would need to have it surveyed. They have to go through all the hoops. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that this would allow the department to work with these grant holders to move the grants in.
yeah, and it would only be for this area. It doesn't cover the entire parcel,
It's just, I see exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
just right here.
Brian?
Yep.
Yes, Helen.
Yeah, so maybe amend the motion to include the word or extensions, just to be crystal clear. I mean, technically an extension is a new grant and it's approved like a new grant, but
Yeah, it's a licensed area.
yeah. So, okay, do you feel that the motion needs to be amended?
No,
Okay, but do we all understand it includes like, you couldn't have, I can't, put my arrow all over it like you can't, but it means that those areas in green couldn't go and apply for an extension and get it.
that's correct.
Okay, we all understand that from the motion? Okay,
So roll call vote, please.
So again, there's people from the,
So there's been a
Public.
motion, it's been seconded. We still have a lot more to discuss tonight, so I'd like to have a roll call vote.
Ryan, I want to remind everybody, this is just a temporary hit the pause button. Okay, this isn't some freeze it for everything.
well, not if we're voting on it. I would disagree. We're voting to amend things, aren't we?
No, we're voting to have a moratorium so that this can be looked at carefully by the Shellfish Department and the DMF.
And
then-
only within this area for the
Okay.
purpose of, basically, the purpose is going to be to move the deeper water grants
Right.
further in.
So could you please read the motion one more time, Ryan, please?
Okay, the motion was that for the parcels between 17.20, which is this one right here,
Yep.
and 17.19, which is this one here, to 85 or 17.85 FA dash extension, that there be a moratorium on additional licensed areas.
All right. So I'll second that and vote yes for the moratorium,
Okay,
if it hasn't been seconded.
Yes, I seconded it, but that's
Okay.
okay. It doesn't matter.
John, I.
Ryan, I.
Ellen, I.
Okay, I move that the Wellfleet Shellfish Department work with the grant holders of 01-03, 01-06, 792, 01-04, and 01-05 to work with those license holders on moving their license or on relocating their licensed areas within the area that was a moratorium has just been placed on.
Ellen, second.
I see, okay.
Okay, roll call vote.
Janet, I.
John, I.
Ryan, I.
Ellen, I.
Okay. All right. So I see a couple of people with their hands up and I would like to go to them at this point. So Anne, you're up first, or Anne Sterling.
So it's a little late because you already voted, but
Yep.
but I'm unclear what it means in terms again of more or less or the same beach traffic. In other words, the grants that you want to move from the deep water into the purple area, are those currently being worked? So is that a status quo in terms of, again, number of trucks, number of people coming down and working things on the beach?
Generally, yes. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 additional truck trips. It's not really clear, but the ones that are being worked, they park or they do drive their trucks out there. They park, somewhere that's dry, and then they bring a boat out
I see.
with them off the back of their truck normally. So
Okay, so what you've just voted isn't going to really change the general beach use over the big picture of it right now.
no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. David's iPad. Can you unmute him? And David, you'll have to identify yourself for the record.
All set.
Hi, this is David Agger. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't know whether this is useful information or a distraction, but as a member of a family who has had a mooring on Mayo Beach, right at Chequasit Bluff for the past 50 years, where there's been increased use and shell fishing over that time. And I have talked with both the harbor master's office and the shellfish office about the increase in buoys and equipment that's in that area. I think over the past 50 years that I've been using that access for a mooring, we've had a very agreeable relationship with the shellfish grants. But over the years, it's become more and more complicated, and I think risky and potentially soon to happen dangerous in terms of both shellfishing equipment and boating equipment in terms of accessing the high water mark moorings that you have to sort of traverse through the grants. So I think that there's something that can be learned from those people that do have those moorings off of Mayo Beach in terms of access and working things out. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So that's not the subject of the hearing tonight. We are exclusively looking at the HDYLTA parcels. So, and then and why? And again, I'll ask you to identify yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is actually Chris Roxburgh. I'm a member of the Udowit family, and we are abutters at the end of Omaha Road. I just want to clarify a point.
1 second, Chris. Can you spell your name?
Yep, Roxburgh, R-O-X, B for Bravo, U-R-G-H.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a question regarding the parcels that are going to be moved into the purple area. What will then happen with those empty parcels? Will they cease to be licensable grants? Or could other people then be granted those and we'll have a net increase in the number of people using the beach?
The idea would be that these those licensed areas would be
That
abandoned.
wasn't made clear in the vote. Your motion doesn't mention that at all. It just mentions moving those in.
So we can't make a motion to not license an area that's currently licensed until, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a net increase in trucks on the beach.
No,
Well, yes,
no.
that could be the effect. There's nothing to saying that to the contrary.
So the motion was for the Shellfish Department to, the second motion was for the Shellfish Department to work with these license holders to move their licensed areas in. So it would not increase the total number of licensed areas out there.
Right, but that has nothing to do with the volume.
Okay, all right.
So
Yes, it does. So can you, sorry, Rebecca? Sorry. Thank you.
On it, all set.
Helen?
Yes, I'd like to remind everybody that, first of all, the Shellfish Department is going to work this out and see if it's possible, right? See if that area is unproductive and this can happen. If it's okay, the Select Board, the Shellfish Regulatory Board, which is the Select Board, has to have another hearing to approve this move. And during that hearing, I would guess, decommission those deep water grants. And it would be in line with the policy to have whatever is in use for farming or for picking in the wild be, used to its utmost best level of management, right? So this is just to see if it can even happen. We're not there yet deciding whether or not it is going to happen. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add to that is that we would probably also have to have some motion or change the regulations at some point to say that this area that we are moving the licensed areas off of is no longer licensable in the future. I mean, if that's the purpose of it, then we should really respect the purpose. So, all right. So onward, I guess. So this is more towards Field Point. The question here is whether or not these areas, I know that some of them might be a little high, some of the areas, but I did not highlight where's my pen? Highlight like this area here. Outside of this blue is out of the water at low tide, but is a little bit further down. How would the town for this area? I almost think that we probably should have a committee. There is potentially 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 possible license areas that could exist on their own, that are not necessarily solely extensions. And if there to be developed, I would like, so the last grant that came up for lottery, was there 10 applicants for it? Or 12? Janet or Helen, do you remember?
Let's ask Nancy. I sort of remember,
Yeah.
but it was around there.
12. She's saying only 12. So there were 12 applicants for the last grant that came up for a lottery. So there's definitely a demand for new entrants to enter into shellfishing. And I mean, Wellfleet's always been a town of smallholder farmers. And it's important to, to allow, a smallholder to support their family. So, are there any comments on this,
Yeah, hold on.
Helen?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you. I think these areas, these other purple areas, need to be discussed more carefully. And my first reason for that, in addition to what the options you brought up, which by the way, were also brought up in discussions in the 3 Shellfish Committee meetings, is, I want to put this exactly right. Block grants are complicated in terms of communicability of diseases, and we all learned that in the hard way in the early 2000s with QPX out on Egg Island. And one of the considerations in moving, grants chock-a-block next to each other is that. And to have a committee look into that and weigh it against other good reasons to have more people farming out there, I think needs to be considered carefully, and to have a committee that does it fairly, or to ask the SAB to do it, delegate, that is a special set of meetings, just looking at the options, because I have to say the SAB did a pretty good job on this already, discussing it, but this would give it a finer focus. So I think this deserves also a moratorium, but a limited amount of time. Let's not do this like the other towns did with these big properties. I mean, I'm not talking about a year. Okay, I'm talking about, hey, by December at the latest. Come back with recommendations, we listen to them, and then this board votes on it. Or before December,
Okay, William Sullivan.
Thank you. And sorry again, my video camera is not working tonight. So the first in that circle that you have, the 1.5 acres, the double wedged piece, I think that connects everything very nicely. But my main concern would be the current grants in that area extending out into, I know it's dry at low tide, but that area is really choked off. And I would hate to see that nice flush line come out, because if it was one, then it could be them all. And I think that would add really tight restrictions to an already tight area in there. And then the 1 acre parcel that's in between that, I don't know if that was meant to be in this or not, but that's where the tail end of your circle comes. If that's suitable, that doesn't do any harm to any of the navigation there. But we're starting to get into a really choked up area.
Could you point the area out, Ryan, where he's talking about?
Yep, so that would be, this is the 1 acre parcel right here. It might be 1 acres, it might, I don't know, it might be something a little different because this area does need to be surveyed.
I don't think I see your cursor.
I just circled it, so.
Oh, okay.
Here. Does this help? This one.
Oh, okay. Now I see.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Nancy? Yeah, wait a moment. Has to be unmuted.
Hang on one sec. Who is it, Ryan?
Nancy,
Sorry, yeah, of course.
it looks like it's Clint that wants to speak.
Good, you're good.
Yeah, it's Richard Blakely.
Oh, it's Richard. Hey, Richard.
This particular parcel that's marked is, it's wet. And where all this marsh is up above, that's where the river comes down, and it's very wet, and then it turns into a peat bog. And you can actually drive around it out here on the end, but other than that, that's a dangerous place to try to, I think there's a reason why there's nothing there. And it's because of that peat. And personally, I think it'd be a good idea to leave that alone.
The bottom out there is really dynamic. I mean, everything changes all the time. And to start trying to jam people into each other and fit people in little wedges isn't going to work. And that water moves so fast along the outside edge of those grants there. You go and put gear down there, the water swirls around the legs and it tips all the gear over. It's just going to make more of a mess. So I think that just slowing down a little bit here and really understanding the dynamics of how the water flows through that area is really important before we go leasing bottom that's just going to not make anyone money and mess things all up.
So, and yeah, we want young people to get lease bottom, but we want them to succeed, not fail. And it's really tough. If you could talk to anybody that's in the aquaculture business, and there's a lot of failure, and so we want to lease bottom where somebody will succeed, not bottom that's you can't even walk over.
So I think it's Chris Roxborough again with his hand up. So if you can unmute and why.
Hi, this is actually Ann Udowitz.
Oh, all right.
Hi, I'd like to know who was with Richard Blakely, who just made that comment. She didn't identify herself.
Sorry, that was Barbara Austin.
Barbara, I'm sorry, who?
Barbara Austin.
And what is her position or title?
She's a shellfisher woman.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, John Wolf.
Yeah, through you to Richard and Barbara, it sounds to me like what you were saying is a possible prescription for something that's become, that's been a problem in the past, and that is gear migrating to areas where one would assume would be navigable, which would be further reason to push the pause button on that. Am I correct?
Can you unmute Nancy for the purpose of answering that question?
I can, hang on one second.
Yeah, see, they've had this land for 20 years and they know
Go ahead.
that very well. You can.
You're out of order.
One second, can you mute and why?
Okay,
All
so John, it's not that the gear moves, it's not gonna like migrate to another area. It's just when you have dynamic water flow, maybe Barbara Austin, who
Used to be chair.
chair of Shellfish Advisory and also has had a farm out there since the 80s, can answer better. It's not about gear moving. That would be maybe ice or something. But most people out there take all their gear in, but you can talk about like the dynamics of the water that create undulations in the sand and go ahead.
Yeah, I applied originally for a grant in this area in 1980, and Billy Chapman finally did the grants where I am in 1985. So I've been there for 35 years. So I know where I am, which is up a little bit further.
Hi, Ann. At any rate, the area that is the second, the deeper area that is circled, that the channel, it doesn't stay in the same place all the time. Some years it moves in, some years it moves out. And to try to put people where everything, the flow is so dynamic and so changeable according to what the ice does, what the wind does, what a hurricane might do, would be really unfair to the boaters and to the people who you would put there and try to make a living. It just doesn't look like a viable area. I think we really need to be careful about, like Richard said, setting people up to fail is not fair. We just have to slow down and really think about adding to this area. If we could double the size of Wellfleet Harbor, I think we would all be really happy. But this is a really finite area, and it's already on the, on that tipping point of, I hate to say it, but too much use. We've got to slow down and really think about, what we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I will say, one thing that we do have to keep in mind is the bottom is sand. Anytime that you have sand and a great deal of flow, that sand moves, and it's always moving. So to look at a map 1 year and say that this is this static as to how it's always going to be is, you could go back 6 months later and it could look completely different. Michael DeVasto.
Yeah, hi. I'll put my video back on. I just was looking at the area that you're talking about. This is a lot like the area where my grant is. It is really dynamic. I think this is why there's really two methods for licensing aquaculture, and that's one that the Shellfish Constable can subdivide block grant and lottery off, and the other one is to meet the application requirements. To me, it seems like the important thing is for there to be a determination as to where the line should be, where grants should not go out any further, right? And it seems like this is marked that way. I do know that there has been some issues where your narrow oval, Ryan?
Yep.
Where there's been some boundary, disputed boundary over there where people have been, farming, and that's kind of inside where the channel is. And also, I know if you look down at the Lieutenant's Island section that's opposite those grants right there, there's that one grant that sticks out towards the channel that way. That's actually in a deep part of the channel. I'm not sure why the blue isn't in that whole section, but I've never even seen buoys out there or gear on those 2 acres. That's a 3-acre license on those 2 outside acres the entire time I've worked, because it's so dynamic. I don't think it's usable at all. So really these things kind of take like someone going out there who, if it's the constable and deciding they want to create a lotteried space, or an individual who wants to apply for a site, going out there and really having some knowledge, which is why we have those requirements to qualify, and speaking with people that they know about whether it's a suitable space and whether it could be usable, and then applying and getting the recommendations to use that space. So I'm not sure that the 1 acre circled area that's never been licensed there before is unusable. The grants right next to it are used. To me, it's my opinion that when they initiated the licenses here, Wellfleet did it, 1 acre at a time with a provision for expansion. Some towns do like 5-acre grants right away. They wanted to make sure that people started with 1 acre and then there was a provision to extend, and that the number that they set was 7 acres. Now, obviously, you're looking at the scraps that are kind of left over from all the licenses, and as far as what's left out there. But there's always been a provision that there wasn't a sort of desire to limit people into like a 1 acre or a 3/4 acre license. And I know working my grant, because I basically have about 1.25 acres that's not out of water for 5 hours or 10 hours a day, 5 hours a tide. Working in that amount of space can be incredibly difficult with the densities of gear. 2-foot walking paths between racks. And so when there's these sort of like little potential spaces, to me, it makes sense to, and this is just my opinion, obviously, to allow those grant holders that are in those small spaces, because if it's up here, these inside acres that are really up by the beach, they're really high up. Like, they're not getting much functional space, and spreading out your equipment and not having everything so densely pressed together creates for better growth, even in those circumstances where you have, heavily, where you have oysters that are in those exposed areas where they're exposed for a long time. So moving things so there's more less density of bags and racks is huge for some people. So, that's just my opinion.
Okay, Helen?
Yeah, intensity of use on individuals' grants is entirely up to them. And I'm hearing what Mike's saying, and I've heard what everybody else has had to say to me that I've learned over the years. However, intensity of use in an area in the harbor is the Shellfish Regulatory Board's business in relation to that policy and relation to advice and just what we know about the numbers, productivity, usefulness. And I want to remind everybody, if you look at the whole suite, Brian, if you could make it the big map again, if that's easy for you. A lot of these grants can have up to 4 people on them. Not everybody does what some very good businesses do, including Mike's, which is there's only one licensee named to the grant, and they are using all of it as much as they can. There are other grants that are not used to that capacity, and some of them are quite large, and they could have 4 people on there doing very well. So when the town bought this property, that was very clear to me. I also got the sense, given that the 4 trustees, the 4 owners of the HDYLTA Trust had allowed people to come on here after they got possession of it, I think 1999. It's kind of maxed out if you look at it. They're already, as we know, over 1/3 of the farmed acres in Wellfleet Harbor, in this area with no black mayonnaise. Over 1/3 of what's farmed is already here. And that's the reason I hope that we think very, very carefully about adding any more new acreage, given that the acreage we've got is adequate for more people to be farming on there, given how if you have 3 people on a grant and a 4th person wants to come on, all 3 of those people have to agree to it, right? So that could happen more. And it does happen. People come on and off grants all the time. They come to us, they get transferred on, they get taken off. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess do we want to form some sort of committee to look at the the end of field point here.
Ryan?
Go ahead, Helen.
Yes, I would, but I would like it to include any other purple areas, just in case they need a look. They may not, you know, this committee should do what this kind of committee does. You look at all the options and some of them are not recommendable, right? And then it gets brought to the select board. And
Okay. The issue with that is that we just basically had placed a moratorium on a good chunk of those other purple areas, as you refer to them. And the shellfish department's going to try to move the license holders with licenses in deeper water a little bit closer in.
I'm not talking about those areas, Ron. I'm talking about this stuff over here on the left.
Yeah, this whole area is like, that's all. I would say that's the end of field point.
Okay, so we're talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Okay, and again, if we form a committee, let's have it not be unmanageable. Let's have the committee do outreach. In other words, ask people to come in and testify, right? Give opinions. It might just be that we task the SAB with doing this, to have it done formally and to give them a charge. And we can do that. We can tell them to work on it and to give them a time, a time limit. And to have the results come back to us and then have a hearing about it and make up our minds. But to do a proper planning, job of it, because this really is a huge piece of land and it's normal to do that. And it's our responsibility, I think, to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Okay, Will Sullivan. Can you unmute him?
Yep, hang on one sec. All set.
Hello again. Now that we've expanded that area, one point I'd like to talk about at the very left-hand side of that is the 2.1 acre area in the wild. I would like it to be considered and to consider the upland owner access to that area. If we look behind that, there's a historic mooring field availability in that area, and there is a few boats moored over there, and it's also a lot of kayaks and canoes type of usage there from that whole neighborhood off of King Philip. And I would personally really like to see that stay clear and open for the access at all times to those people that want to use that area, and keeping it in conjunction with the Chapter 91 laws with the upland owner access to it. I think that does give them a good break that area, and if we could somehow mark it out a little bit to a more clear definition for ease of use, and also the ease of the grant owners of that area, so that they be I help everyone coexist a little bit better and make sure that we don't kind of contentious feeling in that area with boating movement being motorized or self-propelled. I think it's very important to keep that open, right?
Okay, John. John.
Oh, he froze again.
Okay, so this is a question for the board. I know that John's MIA at the second. Would we want to try to form, or if we were to form a committee or delegate it to a pre-existing committee, Would you like to do that tonight, or would you prefer that in our next board meeting? Helen?
I would like to do it tonight, and the one thing, and by the way, what Will just brought up, that's exactly the kind of thing that whoever works on it would have to look at, you know, all possibilities. If we do a committee, it shouldn't have anybody on it who is in the trust. I mean, in the HDYLTA property, I would think. But the Shellfish Committee, I think, does a good job with this and is familiar with the options and have already gone pretty far along in a planning mode about it. And if we charge them with doing outreach, specifically about the use of it, I mean, they already had some lists of things that they thought should be looked at. At the end of the last meeting, I wrote them down. Damian Parkington had listed them, things that had come up. So I would be ready to do it tonight, having been to all those meetings. I can't speak to the rest of the board, for the rest of the board, but I also think we need to get a move on here because, you know, people might want to get going with applications. And if we put a temporary moratorium on this area, it should, the planning part of it should happen as quickly as possible so that people know where they stand.
Okay, John's back. So John?
Yes, sorry, I lost my internet connection as usual. Is there any reason that we shouldn't use the SAB as, why do we need to form a committee? Can someone give me a reason why we wouldn't use the SAB for this purpose? Perhaps somebody who's on here from the SAB could answer that.
Well, I'm on here and from the SAB,
One second, John.
I'm sorry.
For the record, can you identify yourself?
Yeah, it's John Duane.
Yep.
Yeah, and I sit on the Shellfish Advisory Board as well as Natural Resources Advisory Board. You know, so the question is a separate committee to determine what should be done at the end of Field Point there. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
No. Or the SAB.
Yeah, I mean, the Shellfish Advisory Board certainly can advise the Select Board on what their opinion is about it. I think that there's certainly a knowledgeable body of folks on the board. So I think they're capable of doing it as an advisory board. I don't know what weight we carry, but I don't know if there needs to be a separate board to do that. I guess I defer to the Select Board to see what you guys think.
Okay, so I mean, it's hard to find people to fill out an entire committee fairly quickly if we want to operate on a tight time frame. I do think, however, that the boating community has to be represented. So I'd almost want like the Shellfish Constable, the Harbor Master. I don't know, somebody maybe from Marina Advisory Committee, somebody from the SAB, something along those lines, to make sure that we include as wide of a section of users as possible. So Mike?
Yeah, I was just gonna remind everyone the advisory board's charge, and that is to advise relative to any plan for future improvement and development of the industry. So it is directly from their charge. But I think Natural Resource Advisory Board is really the only advisory board that considers the whole use of the harbor, and that is their charge with the harbor management plan. So those two boards are actually supposed to work together in the shellfish management plan. And I guess as a stakeholder, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, the Shellfish Advisory Board probably should be leading the charge in the shellfishing aspect, but getting input from these other stakeholders.
Okay, Helen?
Yeah, I realized I've already done this. So back in the day, the select board charged the Shellfish Advisory Board that I was on very specifically to work on an issue. And they also, in the charge, in the motion, they gave us the people we had to do outreach and confer with. They listed them, and I just started a little list. And what you do then on the Shellfish Committee is you have to have a few more meetings, and that's a drag. But, back then we called in the beach department, beach administrator. In this case, you'd want somebody from the Marina Advisory Committee, you'd want the harbor master to come in, or even to give staff support along with the shellfish constable, right? And John's on the NRAB and has been a very good liaison, but to have a formal outreach to that committee about what their input is about it. And the way that works is SAB says to NRAB, we need to know how you feel about the use of this area. NRAB meets on it, sends somebody, or they have a joint meeting, it's up to them, and they discuss it. And we can tell the SAB to do that. And they figure out when they can do it, and we can give them a time limit.
Awesome.
Okay, John?
Yeah, well, having heard it reframed this way, it would make more sense to include, as was pointed out, someone from Marina Advisory, someone from NRAB. So in that sense, yeah, I guess a committee would be the proper way to go about it, provided we can find enough people to form one.
Ryan, I wasn't, if I may?
Yep.
John, I wasn't saying that should happen. I was saying that we can charge the Shellfish Advisory Board to do outreach to these groups. Because as Mike DeVasto just said very clearly, it is clearly in the SAB's charge. I was saying, let's not form another committee, but for this particular task, which we're telling the SAB to do, see, they have to do outreach. It's not optional. Thank you.
Okay, and with the outreach, I would want to try to include the upland abutters as well. Even if they're not necessarily direct abutters, I would say the people within the neighborhood there.
Can I read you a temporary list and see what we think about it?
Yep, shoot.
Okay, so it would include outreach to and meeting with the Marina Advisory Committee, the Beach Department, or the NRAB, the Harbor Master, and upland abutters to the HDYLTA property. And by the way, these are all open meetings. I mean, anybody from the shellfish community can go to it, can go to them and be part of their process at any time. But this committee, the Shellfish Advisory Board, would have to reach out to these groups. But can we think of any others?
Harbor Master's office?
No, I did that.
Oh, okay.
Harbor Master.
Janet, do you have any suggestions?
Nope.
Nope. Yeah, I was gonna put you on the spot.
I just thought you guys have thought about this for months and
yeah,
years.
Yeah, so why are we, it seems like you're starting from like square one. I mean, there's got to be people that are, yeah, I thought this has all been discussed, but yeah, include everybody. There should be a committee presenting their findings to the select board. And then it goes to the harbor master, shellfish advisory, shellfish constable, and I don't know. So nope. I'm gonna be quiet and move this along.
okay, so can you unmute Nancy? I see Becca with her hand up, so. Give it a second here.
Go ahead.
All right, can you hear us?
Yep, now we can.
I'm the current chair of the Shellfish Advisory Board. We can handle this.
And-
We'd like a list of people in writing that you'd like us to include. And also, I would like to see abutters of those areas that we're discussing included in the discussion.
That's what Ryan just mentioned. Yeah.
And I would say, if I could add, that there's nothing in our regulations that says when grant holders ask for extensions or new grants next to abutters, that it should be part of the process to be a good neighbor and go and ask. And this is just future thought. It might be something we want to put in there, just as Becca is bringing up and as a situation that I have encountered too. I think it's fair to be good neighbors
Okay.
and let people know.
Yep. Rebecca, can you unmute and why?
Hi, I think members of Field Point Association and anyone from the Vernon Baker Beach need to be advised. And I feel that property owners in the whole area need to be notified directly through emails or letters about these decisions, and not through a town posting in the newspaper, not letting us know directly. But I think that if it's just an SAB committee, that we need to have property owners in the whole community be involved somehow.
Okay. Helen?
Yeah, Ryan, the one thing I've just written out a motion that we can, take a look at. The one thing is, can you help me describe the area?
Yep. The area south of parcel 17.49.
Hold on, south of parcel.
Yeah, I would say the undeveloped parcels south of 1749.
Yeah, undeveloped parcels south of 17.49. Jesus, number 17. Okay, and the other really hairy thing, through you to Rebecca and to Nancy. Rebecca Taylor. What's a reasonable window of opportunity for you to get this done?
Can you unmute them? Sorry, give us a second.
Okay.
All right, you're good.
I think the way things are going, sometime this year would be good.
So at any rate, he did, I took him out.
Okay,
So by December 31st?
Yeah, you could do it before that. Who knows? You may just decide to meet 4 times in 2 weeks and get it done. Who knows?
Who knows? But having a larger window would be very helpful. It's a lot to organize.
Okay, and Helen, can you include in your motion something to the effect to mail a notice to the property owners, upland property owners?
Well, I move that let me just read you what I've got now.
Okay.
And I think it's clear in there, but we can tweak this. I move that we charge the Shellfish Advisory Board to work with the Marina Advisory Committee, the Beach Department, the NRAB, the Harbor Master, and all upland abutters, including the Field Point Association, to develop recommendations for the use of the undeveloped parcels south of parcel 17.49 and to complete their work on this by December 31st, 2021. Now, if I was on the SAB, I would understand what to work with meant. But, well, to contact and work with. How about that? In other words, somebody from the SAB will have to reach out and give them dates and formally invite them. And Nancy has her hand up,
Nancy?
or she's just waving.
No, she's trying to, no, she's trying to.
And just, to reiterate Becca's suggestion, not only the upland abutters, but the intertidal abutters.
Aha. So, okay, upland abutters, including Field Point, hold on. Point
Okay.
Association.
And
And
you should probably add the Conservation Commission to it.
you're absolutely right. Okay, and Rebecca, don't worry, I'll send this to you, okay?
I think John Dwayne was also trying to signal us, so.
ConsCon, of course, the ConsCon, duh, Helen. And intertidal butters.
Do you want me to unmute him?
Yes, please. Give us a second here, John.
Should be good.
So, as a Shellfish Advisory Board member, Natural Advisory Board, Natural Resources Advisory Board, it's tough for us to, to formulate a list, and all the owners up on Field Point who own property there, they should be contacted. However, the only way I know to do that is through the assessing department. So that's something logistically, you need to figure out how that needs to happen. And if we're talking about one meeting, a simple letter to them announcing a meeting would do it. I don't know exactly what you would want us to do in terms of being the leading force in getting this group together.
Ryan, can I answer that?
Go ahead.
Thank you. John, it's easy as pie. They have a very efficient listserv for their entire Field Point population.
More likely.
And it goes through the head of it, who's Ann Sterling, who's here. And we know that it works very well because they're already contacting that entire population, as well as the smaller group that's the actual association group. So John, that's easy. And the other group, the intertidal abutters group, Nancy has that listed. So those are the two sort of big groups that could be contacted very easily. Thank you.
Okay, and why?
I think you also need to consider Denny O'Connell and the Wellfleet Conservation Trust, since they own a lot of that land. And I also think you need to consider the residents along King Philip from Cove Road, because these trucks are coming at 60 decibels, because I've used my decibel meter, with tracks and trailers from 4:30 in the morning. And those residents need to be aware of this increase of traffic and what's going on. You've got a whole community that's affected by this, not just upland and properties. And on the other side of Sewell's Gutter, you've got that whole area going down to Baker Beach that is affected by this.
Okay, Michael DeVasto.
Yeah, I'm again, as an individual, I'm not so sure it's not becoming unwieldy for the Shellfish Advisory Board to come up with a plan. I mean, once a plan's created, it doesn't to advise the select board, it doesn't instantly become what happens. And that's the purpose of public hearings, to discuss those things. Essentially, you're talking about, pretty small amount of space here. And I think personally that getting too many people involved in a plan creates no plan at all. And, hearing from them at their meeting is one thing, but participating can become very unwieldy pretty quickly when you have that type of numbers of people being involved in actual planning. And the planning would still have to come back to the select board and go through a public hearing process, and presumably, have some comment period before it would become enacted, whatever happens. So just my opinion.
Okay, Helen?
Yeah, sorry to talk so much, but I was on the Shellfish Committee for 9 years, and we dealt with a number of things like this. There were 7 of us. There could be some alternate members. We regularly had people come in. Barbara Austin always made sure to do outreach when we were working on a particular thing. And it worked just fine. And it's not unwieldy. And we're going to want very specific recommendations about a fairly limited subject here. And I think it would work well. And plus, they're already up to speed, as somebody already said. Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, can you unmute Nancy? It's Becca. So give us a second.
All set.
All right, so it looks like we're only talking about 7 acres here. So when we're talking about adding all of these people to a meeting, we're not discussing changing any of the people driving onto the flats. We're not discussing changing the amount of grants at any large quantity. We're only talking about 7 acres. So 1 representative from each of these groups is enough.
Whoever shows up, you can, I'm sorry, Ryan. May I?
We can have an audience.
I'd like to go to John first.
Sorry.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Becca. This sounds to me like it's quickly getting out of hand in terms of the size of a prospective committee. And I agree that one representative from each of these groups is plenty in order to get the job done. We're not talking about that large of an area. We're not talking about an army of new trucks heading for the flats. We need to keep this lean and mean and get the job done. Thank you.
So I think what the motion is going to be is that the Shellfish Advisory Board is the one that's the committee, but they're to do outreach rather than create a 15, 16 person committee, which is not what we're doing. So Helen, if you're ready with the motion.
Yeah, and you'll see that upland owners include the people who own Sewell's Gutter, which is the Wellfleet Conservation Trust. So I move that we charge the Shellfish Advisory Board to contact and work with the Conservation Commission, the Beach Department, the NRAB, the Harbor Master, Upland Abutters, Intertidal Abutters, and the Marina Advisory Committee to develop recommendations for the use of undeveloped parcels on undeveloped parcels south of parcel number 17.49 within the property known as the HDYLTA property by or before December 31st, 2021. Do you want me to read it again?
No, second.
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Janet, I.
John, I.
Ryan, I.
Helen, I.
Okay, and then the question is, do we place a temporary moratorium
Yes.
on this area?
I would recommend that, given it's very temporary.
Okay, can you make a motion, Helen?
Oh, God. I move that we place a moratorium on any, what were your words, Ryan?
Further
development of the area. But no, I'm sorry, you make the motion because the phrase you used for the license, do it.
Okay, I move to place a moratorium on licensing of additional areas south of parcel 17.49 within the HDYLTA property. This moratorium shall expire on, we'll say,
Let's not do that in case Shellfish Committee
Yeah.
says we
Why don't
need
we-
5 more days.
What do we,
Let's
what do we
just-
say on completion of the work by the Shellfish Advisory Board?
yeah, it would have to come before us, so.
Doesn't even need an expiration date.
Okay,
Second,
roll call vote.
Okay, Janet, I.
John, I.
Ryan, I.
Ellen, I.
Okay. So I move to adjourn and close this public hearing.
Ellen, second.
Janet, I.
John, I.
Ryan, I.
Ellen, I.
All right, good night, all.
Good job.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.